Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, discussing all things audiobooks with the authors that write the stories and the narrators that perform them. Brought to you by Viviana, Enchantress of Books.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 11 of the Audiobook Lovin Podcast. Today, my guest is narrator Liam DiCosimo. Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, Liam.
Thank you, Vivian. I am so excited to be on the show. This was something that I feel like somebody had half mentioned it on Twitter once, like, oh, you should have this idiot on. And you were like, yeah, we'll get there. And I was like, oh, I'm going to earn my way up to be able to chat with Viviana just once. Even if it's just one time, that's all I want.
Oh, see, it's never usually one time. Once I have you, and you guys are usually really awesome, and I love all of you. So usually I always have you come back either for the series in June, or we'll do like a year catch up, or depending on what's going on, some other mix and matches. So once you're here, you're family. So
I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
But yeah, that's true. That's how I found learned of you was through the Twitter post about, yeah, you should have him. And I'm like, yeah, we'll get there. He just started narrating. He only has one book.
Yeah.
I'm on, right? I'll put him on my list. If he gets to do book 2, we're good.
Yeah. Not flash in the pan. So tell me about the one book you've ever narrated. How was that experience?
Yeah.
Why aren't you able to get any more books?
Yeah, exactly. But for those that are still getting to know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been narrating, and how you became a narrator?
Absolutely. So, as you said, my name is Liam DiCosimo. I am a audiobook narrator, specializing mostly in romance. I have been narrating now for just shy of a year. I started in March of 2020, just before the world went to shit. So, oh wait, am I allowed to curse on the show?
Yes, you are. Fuck
okay,
yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Oh, I just wanted to make sure. I was like,
I appreciate that, but yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, perfect. So it's it's been one hell of a year. I really got into narrating because previously I had worked sort of intermittently as a voice actor, mostly due to my best friend and partner in crime, Tim Page, which I know you guys are all familiar with. Mm-hmm. But he was making a living as a voice actor, and I've been working a full-time job for years and years now, since after him and I stopped doing touring and being in a band and whatnot, and actually decided to settle down and get married and have kids and work real people jobs. I went to work the rat race, and he went to actually work the dream jobs. So he was doing, voiceover work, was getting really good work. Like, he was on Jimmy Kimmel a bunch of times. He was the voice of the UFC for a little bit, like really good stuff. And he kept kind of pushing me like, hey, you got to do this. You got to do this. So when he got into audiobooks, he had sent me like a training course and was like, dude, you're going to be home for 6 weeks, because my daughter had just been born in October of 2019. And he was like, look, you've got 6 weeks on family leave. Do this course. I guarantee you're going to love it. So I did the course, and then it took me a little bit to really be like, all right, do I want to audition? Like, how am I going to get this to work? And he had actually had to turn down a book from somebody he had narrated for previously, and had offered up my name. And the guy was like, yeah, if he wants to send me a quick 3 to 5 minute read, I'll see if it's something that I like. And that author was Brian O'Sullivan, which my very first book was called Revenge at Sea, which was a murder mystery thriller, which was absolutely right up my alley. I grew up on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, Dick Francis, just, love that style of writing, that style of book. So that was the first one I ever officially was contracted for. And then the other one was actually Screwed by K.M. Newhold. It was the second book that I got picked for. And obviously that was with the one and only Tim Page. So there was nothing better than the fact that my wife was already proofreading a good portion of Tim's books. And now here I was going to do, as my second book ever, a male romance with my absolute best friend, where we were going to have very awesome sex scenes that she was going to have to proofread, not just one side, but both sides. So literally it's her husband and her husband's best friend fucking each other, and she has to listen to it. Absolute dream at that point. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. Haha, pun intended. It just sort of snowballed from there, where, I started really getting, more and more of the romance novels, both male. I got a Menage a Trois book, which was really, really awesome to get as well. And then some, male-female romance, which was a lot of fun. And I think I'm 30 some odd books in at this point. And I'm still technically only a part-time narrator. So it's been awesome. It's been a very, very eventful first year.
Yeah. So you get home for 6 weeks to take care of the kid and learn how to be, do the diapers or, with this, and you're like, I'm going to learn how to do an audiobook. Yay.
Well, luckily this was our second kid because we have a 6-year-old boy as well. So I already had the training wheels kicked off after him.
Okay.
But it's a whole nother ball game when it's a little girl, because
I was going to say,
I'm like, the piping is completely different. And like, before I'm just kind of wiping poop out of the, folds of my son's balls, but with a female, it's completely different. So it was a great learning experience, but I have the paired set now. So I am super excited.
Yeah. No, kids are great.
Mine are. I do love my kids. I love all kids, but my kids are just a cut above the rest. They are pretty awesome.
Well, you're stuck with them forever, so it's good that you like them.
I like to think of it more as they're stuck with me forever. So
yeah, you never know. Mine is 18, so I'm like, okay. It doesn't end at that age either. It continues.
See, and my mother used to always joke that the way you could tell that Jesus Christ was Irish was because he lived with his parents till he was 33.
Oh.
So.
Well, Latins too.
Yes. And I moved in and out of my mother's house depending on whether I was on tour or living in an apartment with Tim. But yeah, I'd say by the time I moved to California, I was 28. So yeah, I figure I have my son for at least the next 22 years. So I'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly. So your wife has, so she listens just because she's proofing, or does she listen to the genre of in audiobooks in general because she likes to listen?
So a little bit of both. So initially it was funny because I want to say she started proofing the year before I got into audiobooks. So I think she started in 2018, just randomly proofing some books for Tim. And like some of them were Spider-Man books that he was doing for Marvel. Others were like Motorcycle Club books, which were, hot and steamy and very different for her. So I think she probably wouldn't have chosen to listen to those types of books or read those types of books, but now that she's kind of been forced into proofing them, she actually really enjoys the storylines. She was a big fan of the first book that I did, The Revenge at Sea, because she legitimately wanted to find out how the book ends. And I thought that was really cool because I kind of thought it was more of let me just, listen for my husband fucking up because here he goes again, changing an and to a but, or she figured out that I mispronounced the word especially because I would say especially. And I never realized that was something that I was doing. So nice little things like that where your wife gets to take a dig at you, but she really seems to enjoy it. And I want to say her New Year's resolution had been she wanted to read more books, and this allowed her to fulfill that resolution.
Cool. Yeah, I know sometimes the spouses are like, no, I don't want to hear you do anything. Or they're like, no, that's not the genre that I listen to. So it's always curious and interesting to see that, kind of like relationship in that work area. So that's cool.
For sure. And I think with my wife, she kind of already had a taste of it before because, as I said, Tim and I were in a touring band, and that's actually how I met my wife, was when we were on tour through California. So she had listened to me sing both live and on recording and whatnot. So, whether I was, singing specifically about an experience that her and I had, or if I was singing just in generalities, she was kind of already used to that aspect of me. So now it was just, I removed the sing song form and it's just me, blindly stumbling my way through somebody else's book. So it's nice.
Yeah. I think the other side too sometimes is that when we're with someone as a partner or even friends, sometimes we don't really stop to think about how they sound. And then some of us go goo goo gaga over your voices, you know, and the other is like, you're really going to go goo over him? I mean, I'm married to him, really?
Yeah.
You don't go goo? I'm like, you don't go goo? I'm like, no, I've been with him for over 20. I'm like, okay.
You're like, I could see how that might be burned out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you prep a book once you've received it and you've been cast for it?
Well, I think it kind of depends on the book too. For a lot of the times, if it's, a solo book, if I'm going to be doing, the entire, all 30 some odd chapters by myself, a lot of it, I'll kind of prep a couple chapters at a time, as opposed to trying to do the entire book all at once and then going back to the beginning, because I like the information to be fresh. and I like to try to make sure that the emotions sort of fit what I'm doing. When it's a book that I'm going to co-narrate with somebody else, I'll typically go through the entirety of the book, so that way we can coordinate when it comes to character voices, when it comes to how we're going to perform certain scenes. Especially if a scene kind of changes point of view midway through the chapter, just to make sure that there is a consistency in the delivery, because the pet peeve that I have is when something sounds drastically different, whether it's a character voice or even the pacing that somebody is delivering the lines. You really want to have that consistency so the character feels like a real person that you're listening to when they speak. The other side of it, I actually recently had done a 4-book series for an author named Only James. I love her. She's absolutely fantastic. But it's male romance, and each book has 2 new characters that all kind of coexist around the other characters. So I had to very specifically develop voices for each one of them, knowing that it wasn't going to just be a throwaway character, that this was going to have to be somebody that I could maintain a character voice throughout the entirety of a book, and then also have them pop in sporadically throughout the series. So it was a much bigger undertaking than I probably originally thought, but I absolutely loved the end result.
That's cool. So how do you go about choosing how these characters are going to sound and their tones when they're like that?
Sometimes you'll look for cues from the author as well. Recently, I just wrapped up on a book where I had started doing a voice for a character, and then later on in the chapters, they described her voice as nasally, and I hadn't done that initially, so I had to go back and re-record the dialogue from an earlier chapter to make sure that it was going to stay consistent, because you wouldn't want to do a voice that wasn't nasally and then have that read in the book, and they're going, well, that doesn't describe how the character sounds. And on the flip side, there was another book I did where one of the male characters was supposed to have like a Tiny Tim falsetto, really high voice. And when I did it, it didn't sound good. Like when I would go back and listen to it on playback, I was like, that's not enjoyable to listen to. So I toned it down so it was just higher in my register, as opposed to going full on falsetto, just for the performance sake, because I don't want someone to listen to the book and be like, oh, it's really grating. I don't think I can finish this book because I don't know how often this character is going to pop up. So it's
true.
So sometimes it is trial and error. There's times where I'll start somebody's voice and I'll get a couple lines in and I go, no, that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right for the character. And I'll go back and I'll play around with it till I pick up a voice that I do enjoy.
I've noticed sometimes, especially with the series, is that you hear this one character who is a throwaway or, sidekick or whatever, and then you don't see them for another 5 more books. And then all of a sudden they're the hero.
Yep.
And you're going, fuck.
Yep. And that is always something that could come back and bite you. But for the most part, I feel like people would almost understand if you made a positional change on that character where you're like, okay, well, they were throwaway in book 1. I'm in book 5 now. Let me give them a voice that is a little bit more presentable and enjoyable for the listener. And not even just for the listener, but for yourself as a narrator, to make sure that it's somebody that you want to perform this character.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think something that I've always said is that we have our ears hear differently as far as the tones and things like that. So how I hear, because I always think of like, my voice is so bad, I don't want to hear it. And, so that's how I hear things versus how someone else is hearing me speak. It's completely different. So that's kind of how I take it when it comes down to the narrators. When it happens like that this character in one book sounds completely different than in their main book, it's been like, I'm just hearing it from a different point of view.
For sure. And I think sometimes too, it's, when you're doing, first person point of view on a book, and that point of view is going to change each book because it's a new character that's taking the lead. You still want to pretty much present it in your own voice. There might be slight stylistic decisions that you make, whether it's the tone or the inflection, that kind of varies it a little bit. But for the most part, you still are trying to maintain your typical narrator voice. When it's a little bit different when it is third person perspective, which is a good majority of the books I feel like I've done are typically third person, which I enjoy, because that way the standard narration is just my speaking voice, and then I can create disparate voices for each character.
You mentioned earlier that you were in a band and singing.
Yes.
Have you taken any of that, like the rituals as far as warming up your voice into narration? Like, do you have a routine that you do?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. So And it's kind of tough because, as I said, I'm a part-time narrator, so I either have to wake up early before I'm going to start my other job and try to record early in the morning, which can be difficult, right? Because a lot of the time we have a bit more of a huskiness to our voice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's trying to train out, and I'll do vocal warm-ups or a little bit of light singing to, kind of loosen and warm up the vocal cords. So that way, by the time I go to jump into the narration, it's not completely different from, if I was recording the night before trying to go to bed. And then, on my days off, like obviously I can, put in a good amount of time in the studio, just trying to, get through as many chapters as possible, without burning out my voice and without feeling like I'm just running through it without really conveying the emotion or the care and concern that, you'd want to give each individual book. So, yeah, I mean, being a musician and, I've been musically inclined my entire life. My mother was our choir director for the church that I grew up at. My father was our church organist. So I grew up, going to church until I was about 18 and then was kind of like, I'm out of here. And then, no offense to anybody that is religious, like absolutely, if that's your bag, like that's awesome. Yep. I'm glad that you were able to maintain that faith. Unfortunately, I'm an asshole and I'm just not one of the people that was able to hold on to that. So
thanks, bye.
Right. I think different strokes for different folks.
Yep.
Well, quite literally. So I think for me, growing up in that, doing musicals, playing in bands, I'm a punk rocker, I've tattoos and crazy hair and all that good stuff. So, I grew up in the punk rock scene, listening to bands like Green Day and The Offspring and The Clash and Ramones. And, even before that, I grew up on jazz, and Queen was and still is my all-time favorite band. So seeing a singer like Freddie Mercury that has, had talent that just is unparalleled. There's just nobody that will ever be able to achieve the greatness that Freddie Mercury was able to bring to, each and every Queen song is just, something that I always strived for, but knowing I would never quite be able to get to that level, but still trying to make it my own. And I tried to apply that same mentality to when I do audiobooks. Because I'm like you kind of mentioned earlier, we're in our own head. We have a different feel for the sound of our voice. And I've never actually cared for my speaking voice. I think I'm kind of obnoxious, but I know that the way that I speak and the fact that I can be very engaging and very welcoming to other people, I think that my voice has a very natural, friendly tone to it that I think makes it easier to translate that into an audiobook, that somebody feels like they're listening to a friend read to them or speak to them, as opposed to, some seasoned professional Hollywood actor. Like, I'm sure everybody would love to have Brad Pitt or Ryan Reynolds or somebody read a book to them. Hugh Jackman, right? I think we'd all love Hugh Jackman to read a book to us. But I think that there's somewhat of a pedestal that sometimes we put these people on. And I feel like my voice kind of has that even playing field where I feel familiar to almost anybody.
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying before we started officially recording, I was nervous because we've never spoken before like this. And I was like, oh, he's a nerd. I'm going to fuck this up. But as soon as we started chit-chatting, I'm like, it was, the voice, but also you do have this energy of like, hey, we've been friends for like years. I'm like, oh yeah, we have.
And I strive for that, because so much of my life, whether I was working sales positions or, retail, or even just being in a band, because you need to convey a certain amount of openness, but still confident, right? You're confident in what you do, but you want to be open and welcoming to people. Because, whether we were walking the lines at Warped Tour, trying to get people to, stand at our stage and watch our band, or, buy a CD in the lines, or, we used to walk the shopping malls in cities before we would play the show that night, and just walk up to kids and go, hey, we're in a band. Here's a pair of headphones. Do you want to listen to us? And, if they liked it, we're like, hey, we're playing a show tonight if you'd like to come out. So we would try to kind of build up an audience for each city that we went to. And, when you put yourself in that, what would typically be a very awkward position so frequently, I mean, we did that for years and years. It makes almost any conversation easy to walk into.
Yeah, and that's important, I think, especially even now with social media, where a couple of years ago, we didn't know who the narrators were. We didn't have any of that connection. And now fast forward and we can DM you if you're on social media and things like that, and let you know how awesome this book was and how much we loved you guys and stuff, where you guys are more accessible. So I think that's also a perk and a bonus on listeners' ends. And I hope that you guys like that too.
Oh, 100%. I mean, when Tim and I had started the band that we were in, we had started in 2006, and him and I had done bands all the way back into the 90s, not together, but, we'd both been in separate bands, and then, our social circle kind of collided, and that's how him and I became friends. But it was one of those things where, as you're, how do I put it? As you're, as you've developed as a musician, as you've developed as an individual, once you got to things like MySpace and, eventually Facebook, and I know, right, I'm dating myself there.
I used to have an account.
Oh, heck, I loved MySpace. That's why for anybody that follows me on Facebook, they know I almost never post unless it's something that is being simultaneously posted through my Twitter or Instagram, because I dislike Facebook. I'm sorry. I have never been a fan of Facebook, but I adored MySpace. I loved the interface. I loved the people that I was friends with on there. It was just such an easy platform to use. So, once we had MySpace and then, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, there were so many different ways to connect to people globally, not just on a local level. I loved that. I mean, on the flip side, unfortunately, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. Yep. So you do run into a lot of negativity, but you got that block button for a reason. If somebody's popping up in your timeline and you don't care for what they're saying, go ahead and block them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just use the ball on my mouse, and I think that's why it was invented, to scroll on by.
Yeah, there you go.
Because it's true, and I've used that exact same analogy of same thing like reviews. There are opinions, and opinions, everybody has one, like our assholes. So yep. And so there's always good with bad, but I try not to let one bad apple ruin the rest of it. So
no, for sure. I mean, I was just looking at some of the comments on one of the books I had done recently, and one person was like, "Hey, I like the narrator, but I didn't like the voice that he used for this character, but I know that is just me, and maybe it works for somebody else." And then I scrolled like 2 comments down, and somebody else was like, "I absolutely love this character's voice. It's so sexy." And I was like, even just there, like, you can't get caught up on the negativity, because, for every one negative, there's probably at least 2 positives. So
yeah, but take
it for feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the way that was phrased, that's to some extent, creative criticism.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm fine with reviews that are like that says, oh, for me, or I wish that they would have, or things like that. It's when they're fucking assholes. So who was it? It was Victoria May on her TikTok was sharing some of reading her bad reviews. And she mentioned that, this person said, "I would rather eat glass than listen to this book again." I'm going, dude, you're a dick.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I have some comments like that. Like, I know one person was like, "I hated this character. If it keeps popping up in other books, I probably won't listen." There was another person that was like, "Well, I heard he's really new, so I'm sure these are just bad decisions that he's making because he doesn't know better." And I was like, whoa, fuck you. Slow down a little bit. Like, yeah, I'm great, but come on now. But like we said, I mean, it's opinion. So I try not to get hung up on it, because I remember way back, with Honor Bright, that was the band that Tim and I did. I remember the first full length we put out, and I got a review that came back that said the other musicians are trying in vain to make up for the lack of quality of their lead singer. And it hurt me so bad. Like, I literally just sat there like, why the fuck do I still do this? Like, obviously I don't sing well. Like, if these guys are trying to make up for my lack of ability, then I shouldn't be in this band. Like, they're good. Let them find somebody else. And I remember Tim being like, "Fuck that guy. Seriously, fuck that guy." He was like, "I don't even know who this guy is. This is some asshole writing in a basement. You're really going to get hung up on what this dude thinks? Fuck him. I think your voice is great, and my opinion should matter more than his." And I go, "Fuck, dude, you're right." And like, sometimes you need that person to kind of snap you out of it and be like, "Look, somebody's going to always have some negative shit to say. And sometimes it's not even about you. Like, maybe they're just unhappy or they had a bad day when they happen to write that review, and you take it with a grain of salt and you move on."
Yeah. Well, again, opinions are like assholes. We all have one. Yes. But I always say, try to, be constructive in your feedback. And, if you can't say anything nice, shut the fuck up.
Right. My mother used to say that. I think it's from Bambi, where like, if you can't say something nice, shut your fucking mouth. So, I mean, it's, it's nice. It's important things.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, there's enough negativity out there. I don't think Bambi said it that way though, but I'm sure it's the gist of it.
Well, it was Thumper the rabbit. I mean,
yeah.
Disney movies were very different back in the early days. So.
Oh, okay. I need to find that copy.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we are all suckers when it comes down to audiobooks are the accents. What is your favorite accent to perform?
Ooh, so for me, I grew up in the city of Syracuse, which is in upstate New York. For people that are not familiar with New York's geography, Syracuse is about 4 hours northwest of New York City. So a lot of people, when they hear you're from New York, they assume, Brooklyn or even Manhattan or Bronx or something. And, while I can slip into, like a Brooklyn accent or a Bronx accent, especially if I'm going to be Coney Island or Gravesend or something, real deep in the, in the suburbs, the five boroughs, that's the type of accent any New Yorker, it's really easy for us to fall into it. But for me, my hands down favorite accent is the Irish lilt. So as I said, I grew up in upstate New York. My mother is Irish. Her mother is Irish as well. We all did Irish dancing. So, I grew up around going to, feshes. We go to the Oireachtas, which is a big Irish festival that they have down in New York City in Terrytown. And I love that accent. I think there's a certain lilt, there's a certain warmth that voice brings to people. And I think that for the most part, it's tough to do the accent without falling completely into Lucky Charms, but you still want to have somewhat of that rhythm, that flow. It's a musicality to the voice that absolutely just warms the heart. I mean, you can say English is the universal language, but I'd say the Irish accent is the language of love.
Aw.
But I do find more recently I have to slip into a Southern accent, and I cannot do much variance when it comes to a Southern accent. So everything just sounds like Eastern Texas / Louisiana. I'm a big Gambit fan from the X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
So every time I go to do my Southern accent, I have to do, there's always more gators in a bayou. And then I can fall into the accent real quickly. So anytime I'm doing someone, whether they're from Georgia or Mississippi or even Virginia, this is the accent that I go with. I had to do an entire book where the point of view was a character from Virginia, but that was pretty much his accent because I can't do any other Southern accents. So my apologies in advance for anybody that went into that expecting a legitimate Virginian accent.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people think when it comes down to like the Southern accents that there's just one, and I'm like, no. They're very different, and people will tell you if you did it right or wrong. But that was yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, and I think it's tough because if you, depending on where you want to go with the timbre of your voice, like if I'm going to sit down here and try to do that accent, or if I'm going to be up here and do that accent as well, it almost completely changes the dynamic of where I'm going to be from and who this character is. So when you hear that deep rumbly voice, that's someone you think is probably a bit more brooding, a bit more sexy. Whereas when I talk up here, I'm probably more of a swindler, maybe a bit of a politician, if you will. And more than likely, I'm not the hero of the book.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really good. I love your Irish.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's funny. So before I got into narrating, Tim got a book where he had to do an Irish accent, and he sent me phrases he needed me to say in Irish so that way he could mimic it for the book, because he does a flawless British accent. I absolutely adore his British accent, and mine always falls into Irish. So anytime I'm trying to do a British voice, I always have to redo the line to try to maintain that specific accent.
Mm-hmm.
But the Irish one, I can fall into it so easily. I love that accent.
Yeah, usually when people say like, oh, what's your favorite? People tend to go for the British. And I always like, I really like Irish, Scottish, and then like British in that order.
Well, and even with like a British accent, like what you were saying with the Southern accent, whether it's British or Irish, it's so different depending on regionality.
Yes.
So if you, even within the same city, like an Eastern London accent is vastly different than a Northern London accent. Mm-hmm. And then if you're going to like Manchester or Liverpool, or you're going over into Wales or like you said, up into Scotland, like such differences in the accents. That's something that I've been trying to work on is be more regional with the dialect. Same thing with Irish. I can typically do like a Cork accent. I can do a Galway accent, and I can do a Dublin accent, like South Dublin, not North Dublin. And it's, I think those are the kind of things that as you continue to develop and hone your craft, those little nuances are the things you pay attention to because you just want to be better than you were on the book before. Yeah.
And I think too, it depends on, as a listener, like I can tell certain regions when it comes down to like the British or the Irish. But Never been there. So it's one of those where I'm like, oh, it's the accent, and swoon happens. So it's fine. But it's also where you hear like, well, I'm Irish and that doesn't sound like we are. And I see those reviews and I'm going, it's okay. There's more than one.
Yeah.
He sounded good. Stop.
Oh, for sure. And it's also the same thing. Like when you hear somebody from England or Ireland doing an American accent, and there'll be certain words that they say that you're just like, oh, that's not typically how we say it.
Mhm.
But you understand, it's a difference. My wife picks on me because I say adult instead of adult, and I say advertisement instead of advertisement. But where I grew up, like, we're kind of used to saying it a certain way because we have so much of that Irish influence. But then it's funny because she'll say it that way every now and again because she's been around me for so many years. So I love it. It's just, you almost create your own accent depending on what you're used to saying.
Yes, exactly. So on the flip side of your favorite, what's your hardest to perform?
Ooh, I actually lost a book because I couldn't maintain a British accent. So early days, I got booked for a male romance, and the book was hilarious. It was a very funny, very awesome book. I was very excited to work on it. But when I went to send my first 15, he was like, hey, can you do the British voice, but do it a little bit more like Hugh Grant? So I was watching all these videos of Hugh Grant trying to really mimic the accent. And I think I gave it like 3 or 4 goes. And he finally was like, hey, I appreciate that you've done all that work, but it just doesn't sound right for me. And I was like, I was crushed. It sucked because it was so early in my career. But I also understood like he had a very specific voice in mind, and unfortunately mine just wasn't it. So the British accent would definitely be something. And it's more of the what is it, like the Queen's British, like the RP, Royal Pronunciation.
Yep.
That's what I really need to work on. Like I could fake my way through like a East London, Essex, Cockney accent. But most of the other areas of England, I really need to buckle down and get that a bit more tidied up.
Yeah. Well, it's a great world we live in where everything's global and we can Google it or YouTube it.
Oh, yeah. I feel like that's the only reason YouTube exists anymore.
Yes. I mean, the things that you learn, I know, self-taught on a lot of different things. And I'm like, oh, okay. Even with this podcast, I'm like, how do I start one? I'm going to Google it.
Yeah. I learned how to replace a toilet by using Google. So
light switch.
Yes, it can be done.
Yes, it can. But yeah, those are always fun. Romance is almost like an umbrella term with the subgenres underneath it, with the difference when it comes down to, paranormal, contemporary, and stuff like that. What is your favorite subgenre of romance to perform?
So this is actually going to be kind of funny, but I actually really, really like the male erotic. it's kind of fun. For me, it's obviously quite a bit easier because typically those books are male dominated, across all the characterization. So it's easier for me to create different characters, typically, just using different pacing or certain pentameter to the way that the voice is being utilized. Sometimes it's even whether it's nasally or whether it's back of the throat, and just trying to find a way to define each character. I'm kind of a one-trick pony when it comes to females. So when I have to do, a lot of female voices within a book, sometimes the certain voices can get a little redundant. So I try, to go a little bit breathier or go a little bit higher in my register or slow the voice down just to give it enough of a difference from the other characters that people know who's talking, especially when it's one female talking to another female, and really making sure that it sounds specific for each character. But that might be because I've gotten a lot of those books so far in my career. So maybe that's why I enjoy them, because it's nice to have that consistency of work. My preference would definitely be like murder mystery, like thrillers. As I said before, Sherlock Holmes, Dick Francis books, which if people aren't familiar with him, he writes, he's a former jockey, and all of his books are murder mystery books involving horse racing in one way, shape, or form. And you wouldn't think you'd be able to use that same subject matter and keep it interesting, but he absolutely does. He is such a fantastic author. And my other big ones would probably be sci-fi. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so I do like the sci-fi fantasy stuff. Stephen King's Dark Tower series is one of my favorite series, as well as Altered Carbon, which was recently turned into a Netflix television show. But I had read the original book, and absolutely loved it. Loved the subject matter, loved the sci-fi functionality of it, the mystery, the twists and turns. I mean, I would love to do more books like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I did not know that you were that versatile as far as the different genres. That's cool.
It's been really fun. I actually recently was just booked for a book that is a romance novel that is fantasy, and that's kind of new for me. I'm really excited to dive into that one.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I love romance, is because you can basically put any genre, spin on it. It can be, epic, it could be erotica, it could be a murder mystery, as long as the romance is the main focus. And there's just so many options out there, something for everybody.
Oh, 100%. And I think that that's probably something that I wasn't super familiar with prior to being a narrator, which my eyes are wide open now, just knowing that there's so much potential out there. And these authors are absolutely pushing the limit of what can be done. And I applaud that people take the chances that they do, not just to write the book, but then taking chances on narrators like me to give me the platform, give me the opportunity to bring those characters to life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's my favorite to listen and read originally, because I'm like 100% audiobook now. So, but it's, again, you can find almost anything, including even YA and middle grade, not so much middle grade, but YA and young adults, which that was always a new term for me still. Like, new adult, does that mean there's a middle adults and a vintage and antique adult
Right.
as well? But yeah, is there a genre that you have yet to narrate that you'd like to?
I haven't done children's books. And that probably sounds a little bit weird for somebody that has made most of their career out of erotic and sexuality. But I would actually really like to do children's books. When I was younger, one of my favorite books was The Westing Game. And something like that, where it is sort of this young adult, just, fun kind of mystery, but it's still an enjoyable read. That kind of stuff is so much fun. And as I think you and I were talking earlier, I have a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I love reading books to them. I mean, I was reading Chronicles of Narnia to my son, and, just things like that, where I get to do these voices, and it's, something that's for kids, where they'll grow up listening to someone like me being able to narrate and kind of associate my voice with those types of characters. I would love that kind of opportunity.
Well, we put it out there now, so
yeah,
it's awesome. We'll see. And then you have to come back and say, "Hey, we got the book."
Right? Oh, 100%.
Yeah. What do you love most about narrating audiobooks?
I think for me, it's just being able to be simultaneously myself and the author, all in one go. When I'm sitting here after I've, done my prep and I've created these characters, there'll be certain scenes that you almost have to take a break, whether it's because the scene was so hilarious that like you get the giggles and you're just trying to calm down. Or there was another scene that I had done for that 4-book series where there was a scene where the mother of a child actor gets some very bad news. So I'm, doing the mother's voice, and I'm getting choked up, because I want to convey properly the emotion. But even when I had to switch back to the other character that was talking to her, I had to stop and like compose myself to be able to get completely through that scene, especially considering the subject matter involving a younger child, and me having children. It was hard for that not to resonate with me completely. And I love that. I love those moments where you get completely lost in a book. And you weren't even expecting it. It just almost completely catches you off guard. So I think that's probably my favorite part about all this, is being able to bring these characters to life, immerse yourself in these stories, and hopefully present them in a way that other people feel the same way you do.
I'm not a crier when I listen to or read books, but when I do, it's like, oh, that was a good one.
Oh yeah. I wasn't a crier until I had kids. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. The things they do for, to parent, man.
I saw a Disney commercial. This was right after my son was born. There was a Disney commercial where there's a family that takes their daughter to Disney, and she's deaf. And she goes up and like, they're not expecting, any of the characters to be able to communicate with her or anything. So they go to like tell the character that she's deaf, and like Minnie Mouse starts signing to her and Tinkerbell starts signing to her. And I just started bawling. And my wife was upstairs and she looks out of the shoes. What's wrong with you? And I was like, the Disney commercial was so cute. Like, it was crazy. I think that, and then I cried at the end of Black Panther. That was, those are like the 2 times I think in the 10 plus years my wife and I have been together that she's seen me cry. So pretty intense. Didn't cry at my children's births. Didn't cry at my wedding, but yeah, cried at the end of Black Panther. So that tells you who I am.
We all have our, sensitivities.
Hey, man, representation matters. So,
Well, exactly. Then that's one that, it was very moving for me as well, for that movie. But I mean, there's also the moments too that I'm seeing a commercial and it just hits a different way. And I'm going, oh God, they're the tears.
Oh yeah.
Folgers. I'm like, damn it, Folgers.
What? Oh, is it the commercial where the girl goes to get in the shower and her father-in-law's there? And they all pop up and they're singing about Folgers in your cup.
No, not that one. No.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's just me then. My bad.
Oh, goodness. Well, you're talking about not only crying, but also busting out laughing. Do you record and keep your bloopers?
Oh, okay. So before I converted to punch and roll, which basically you stop, it goes back 8 seconds, and then it kind of picks up wherever you left off on your mistake. Previously, I would just snap my fingers if I made a mistake, so that way I would go back through and I would cut out whatever was, whatever the mistake was, and I would create a blooper reel. So I did that early on, but since I transitioned to punch and roll, I really haven't done that anymore. But I kind of feel like I need to, just because a lot of my bloopers are, at least to me, they're really funny. And even if it's only me and my wife that listen to them, I still think they'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I love listening to it, and they're always fun. But I also think it kind of brings back that, oh yeah, they're human. So if I fuck up, it's fine.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And honestly, a lot of the bloopers too are just like a burp or a fart in the booth, and you're just like, oh man. Or like you ate and your stomach gurgles, and you're like, that was audible. I know that came across on the record.
Yeah, well, the reactions too, I think, is something like relatable. And because we listen to these books and you're all hot and steamy and being the alpha and in that moment, and then all of a sudden, the burping or the farting goes, oh, that's right. You are a normal guy. Got it.
Yeah. Well, and I almost want that to be written into like the love scene anyways, because that's so much more realistic, where it's like, they're going down on each other and one of them farts. You know what I mean? Like, or they're laying down on the hardwood floor. One of them goes to sit up and their back makes that farting noise because of the sweat on the floor. Like that's the kind of stuff that you're like, oh, that's so real. Like that's the stuff that happens.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. But then again, it's a whole fantasy thing. And I think that's, then when they say it's an escape, I would find that hilarious. But also my husband is one that would bust out laughing if there was a fart joke or a noise or something like that. And yeah. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I live this.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Let's not.
Let's not do that one. No, there was the sequel to Cocky that I had done, which was called Nailed. My character is kind of a practical joker in that book, and this is one that I did with Tim Page. And there was just one scene when they get a dog, and the things that he says, it's so stupid. I could not make it through the chapter. I literally had to stop and come back to it the next day because it was just I had a bad giggle fit and I could not get over it.
Well, see, the thing is, like, when it comes, I mean, I know a lot of the books are dual, so you're not, it's not a duet where the two of you are at least via Zoom nowadays at the same time. But I can only imagine the giggles and the busting out laughing, having you and Tim do a book that's duets. Oh my God.
It'll be where one of us will send a text and be like, hey dude, enjoy that next chapter, because like we already know what's coming. Especially if at the end of my chapter it's like teeing up the sex scene and I'm like, hey buddy, we're in the shower this time. Like, just to see how he responds. It's great.
Oh goodness, to pick up your phone, that would be hilarious.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, because Tim and I will do a combination of texting and then also like audio messages. So we'll send little audio clips back and forth to each other as well, especially if we're gonna say a whole lot of stuff that we don't want to take the time to type out. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. If you could sit inside if you listen to friggin' Love Gods, you could sit inside Tim and my mind for a good 30 some odd minutes, and anybody that listens to that show knows that him and I are idiots, but we're lovable. We're lovable idiots.
I don't call you guys idiots. I think you guys are down to earth guys.
Yeah, we refer to ourselves as idiots. We're self-proclaimed idiots.
Yes. Yes, you do. So that was one of the questions I had is, So you worked at the job, you have the part-time narrator gig and family man and, life in general. And all of a sudden, boom, let's do a podcast. How did that come about with Tim?
Ooh, okay. So Tim and I originally got into, before getting into voiceover, any of that stuff, Tim and I had a podcast together called I Can't Believe You Haven't Seen That. And this was back in 2013, where for as long as him and I have been friends, which it's like 20 years now that him and I have been best friends, he had never seen Star Wars. And that was like a big barrier, because I'm a self-proclaimed Star Wars fanatic. So for him to not see Star Wars, I was like, how do you exist? How do people exist and they haven't seen Star Wars? And he was like, I'm going to refuse to see it just to bug you. And it got to the point where I go, it doesn't even bug me. I just look at you like you're an idiot. Like, you're missing out on one of the greatest franchises of all time willingly. And that's your choice, dude. Like, you do you. And it wasn't until I moved to California that he was like, I should probably watch these movies. So he watched the original trilogy like all in the same weekend. It was like, dude, these movies were so good. So that was the impetus behind doing I Can't Believe You Haven't Seen That. So each of us would pick a movie that we've never seen that the other one had seen, and then we would review that movie on the podcast. And I think we got like 5 episodes in, maybe 6 episodes, and then stopped. Like, we just could not find the time to keep going with it. Fast forward maybe 2 years later, I was like, well, I still want a podcast, but I know that Tim's too busy. So what if I did a podcast with somebody else and then Tim can pop on from time to time? That would be cool. So I started doing a podcast with a friend of mine, and then maybe like 6 months in, he just couldn't commit to the time. So I coerced my wife into jumping on the show. At first, it was just like hey, fill in for this episode because the other guy can't make it. And she was like, okay, whatever. And then she got on and was like, wow, this is actually a lot of fun. I think I want to do this. And I go, then let's do it. So her and I have been doing that since 2015, it's a Star Wars, Disney, Marvel, Pixar podcast. We also talk about like other movies and entertainment and music and just things that are going on in our family life. It's almost like an audio history for our children to listen to later on. Where they can go and listen to, like, even for them, like our son would pop on the show every now and again. So you can listen to him when he's like 2, 3 years old. It's a lot of fun. So we've done that now. So it's called Hilt Radio, which Hilt is Here You Leave Today. So we've done that since 2015. And then I also do a West Ham United podcast with a friend of mine here in Fresno, California, because I'm a big football or soccer here in the States fan for the team West Ham United. So now that Tim and I do the Love Gods, which is actually the 3rd podcast that him and I have started to do, because we had another podcast called This Story Sucks. And the first episode we ever did, we ended up having to delete it because there was the potential that he was going to miss out on a book because of the stuff we talked about on the show.
Oh boy.
And we were like, well, we're probably just going to get ourselves in hot water. So maybe we don't keep doing this particular show. And then he was doing a book. Oh, I can't remember what it was called either, but it was basically the premise of the Love Gods was this book where it's a love doctor doing a podcast. And he was like, oh, we should do this. And I was like, and we can do it because we're terrible at giving advice. And that was literally the idea for the show. And he was like, oh, well, we should come up with a really corny name. And I go, the Love Gods. And he goes, oh, that'll be good. We'll put that on the list. And I go, no, dude, that is the list. The Love Gods, that's the name of the show. Do or die. That's it. And he goes, all right, I'm in. And now we're 10 episodes in already. And
yes,
crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's this whole thing has been, I love your podcast, and it's a huge mix of, just the 2 guys hanging out and almost like you're just hanging out with friends. And also the whole premise is that, you answer listeners submitted questions about love, sex, and romance with no, just shooting the shit all at the same time.
Yeah, with only real world experience, no actual training or coaching, just 2 idiots going, well, one time at band camp, like bad news.
Which is awesome too, because you actually have that disclaimer in every intro. Is like, if you really need help though, call someone that's a professional.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the goal is eventually to have some people that are professionals on the show. But it's all in good fun. And some people have written back to us and said that they did take our advice and it actually played out to the positive, which has been great. I actually recently got one that was like, hey, you guys suggested trying this, and my husband and I tried it and it didn't work. And I was like, oh, well, that's good too. Like, at least you gave it a go.
Well, I think it's life experiences. You're married. You've had all these years together, and before that, you actually had a life. And the same thing with him. Things that we've learned as we've gotten older, what works, what doesn't. And again, it's romance. We also learn a lot from that for the books. Did not know that you have certain kinks because until you read that one book about BDSM, great, good to know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Didn't know certain things existed till I performed certain books, and I go,
Yeah.
oh, that's a thing. Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I know that you just finished your 10 episode. And now I know why you guys were saying, oh, it's like a huge milestone and this and that. I was going, well, it's awesome. I think anytime that you do an episode, it's a milestone because it's a lot of work.
Yes.
I love doing the podcast, but it's a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
So the fact that you guys now, I guess it makes sense to me because you guys have had all these other ones in the past. Why it's like, oh, look, we get it to 10.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, because like I said, the first one only was like 5 or 6 episodes. The second one was 2. So yeah, we haven't had a good track record. So the fact that this one lasted 10 already, that's massive.
Yeah. And I also love the website
link. Oh yeah. Well, we couldn't get .com because some band that hasn't existed for like 15 years still has it. So he was like, well, these are the other .somethings that we can have. And one of them was LOL. And I go, dude, how do we not take .lol? Like, that's perfect.
Yeah. I didn't know LOL was a thing either. I usually like .com, .net. There's a couple of other ones.
.org.
Yes, exactly. I didn't like, is that serious? Like, oh yeah, it's real. Okay.
Yes. We were so excited.
It's perfect though. It's completely on brand.
Yeah. Right. That way people know exactly what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah. But the other thing too I love about your podcast is that it's not just you and Tim, talking, you're bringing in other people and it's other narrators. I think you also plan on having other authors and stuff like that. And just having these conversations about just listening to the questions that are being submitted and then kind of going off on different conversations as it goes. Very conversational. You just sit there and you're going, oh yeah, it's almost like eavesdropping at a bar.
Yeah. Well, we like to think where it was like Tim and I basically went and sat down on either side of you at the bar or in a booth, and we just started having this conversation. And now you're like, well, they've boxed me in, so I can't leave. I might as well join in and enjoy it.
Yes, look, not so much that I feel like I have to stick around, but it does really, that's a great analogy. It feels like you're just hanging out in that area where you and Tim are talking on either side, and I'm going, no, really? Oh, okay, great. Oh, wow.
Be still, my beating heart. This is insanity. And we're like,
yes.
I know. If you think that shit was crazy, wait till I tell you what happened next.
No. Oh. And then he breaks into the Irish accent. Damn.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's great. And that's definitely something, if you guys have not checked out the Love Gods podcast, you need to. It's fun, it's hilarious, and you actually learn a few things here and there, even if it's, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yes. Even if it's what not to do. We will help you avoid those pitfalls.
Yes. Or it can work out. You never know. So check them out. They do have forms that you can fill out to submit your questions. And you guys also have this cool thing where you can do a voice, almost like a voice note.
Yes.
So that is so cool. Yeah.
That was completely Tim's idea. Tim is the wizard behind, he is the wizard behind the curtain. He absolutely makes all the magic happen for that one, which is great because I have to do that for the other 2 podcasts that I do. So it's nice to kind of, just record and then send my shit to him and go, all right, buddy, have at it.
Here you go. There's more. Yeah, but I love that. I have to, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm going to start. I'm like, nah, I'll see if someone else answers some, submits that question and stuff like that. But one day
you have to at least submit one. Like that is clutch.
No, see, it's like, I've only I've met and hung out with like Tim, virtually, and had him on the podcast too. So it's like, I always knew one of you guys and now I know 2. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, you know me now, but
yeah,
honestly, even if it's because a lot of the people we've had on the show, they've either only met one of us or the other. So it's kind of been nice where they pop on and they're like, oh, you're a new person. Like, cool. I think the only person we've had on that both of us knew beforehand was Avery Reed. With Desiree, Tim knew of Desiree. I knew Desiree because I had done a 2-book series with her, and she was actually absolutely a dream to work with. I freaking love Desiree Ketchum. Like,
I love her too. Had her recently on the podcast.
Oh, you guys had episode 8. Yeah, she was on. Oh my god, she's so freaking good. But yeah, she was a dream to work with, and the author Tina Geffert, who we did the train wreck and car crash for, probably some of my favorite books that I've ever done. But yeah, it's like we've had Zoom chats where it's Tina, me, and Des, like all just chatting. And Tina's Australian. So like it's weird because like Des is on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast, Tina's in friggin' Australia. So she's always like a day ahead of us when we do our Zoom chats. So it's crazy. It's awesome. Them because I freaking love those girls.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too that I love about having these conversations, whether it's on mine or listening to yours, is that you get to know these individuals and then you're like, oh, what have they narrated if you've never listened to them?
Yeah.
You know? And so you're going, oh yeah, because you follow and then you start following them on the social medias and you're like, yay. Like Desiree had the cats. I'm like, oh, I have cats, but her cats are funny. One of them has crisscrossed eyes. It's hilarious.
Oh yeah. A nice boss-eyed cat. Heck
yeah.
Well, and it's cool too because it's kind of mutually beneficial, right? So when we have somebody like Desiree Ketchum or Avery Reed, or we recently had Maxine Mitchell on, right?
Yep.
When somebody like that pops on, obviously our listeners get a chance to listen to them speak and go, oh, I love their voice, I love their personality, their character. Let me go find some books by them. And then their listeners too get to listen to our show and go, oh, these guys are funny. Let me find if they've done books as well. So it kind of benefits both parties. So it's been a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed it.
That's good. Well, I am hoping to have a fun, good party when you guys reach that 1-year anniversary.
Absolutely. Well, before we hit that mark, we'll have you on the show as well so we can torture you with some weird questions.
Oh, fun. I'm used to being on the question, being the one asking the question. So that would be interesting. But that would definitely be fun. I'm looking forward to that. I've done one crossover with Audibly Addicted. And that was, at first it was a little weird, but then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Because you forget that you're doing a podcast episode. It's almost like you're just hanging out with friends and you're just chit-chatting and catching up. So it's really fun. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, and I have to catch up on your episode because I listened to all of them except for this most recent one.
Nice.
Life. But I do listen. So
yeah, no, and that's the last one. I'll forewarn anybody that hasn't tuned in yet. We got really giggly and I made a lot of jokes at Tim's expense. So just understand that him and I still love each other. We are still the bestest of friends. He is still my other wife. That's how I refer to him. So I got mean and I laughed a lot at him, but it's all in good fun.
Yeah, which I love. Well, those friendships are rare. You don't get to have those friendships that span so many years and then you can turn around and say stuff and they're like, but I still love you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, and Tim and I have always been like, we've only ever gotten in 2 fights our entire 20-year friendship. And both of them, well, one of them was a joke. We were doing it just to see if we could make it really awkward for everybody else in the room. And then the other time we were arguing on other people's behalf because they wouldn't argue. So even though we weren't mad at each other, we were trying to argue their points because they just wouldn't do it. So wow. I have never legitimately been in an argument with Tim.
Well, nice.
Yeah.
And you guys do strike me as the pair to say, hey, let's see what the fuck that happens when we start fighting.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. And it was the best. It like the fake fight and the whole part, like it was record scratch. The whole party stopped. It was awesome.
I can only imagine. Because sounds like fun. I used to have a friend that was like that. Just for, when things got awkward, they would start with something like that. I'm like, really? What the fuck?
Nice. Those are the best. They're the best kind of friends to have.
Yes, they are. So we've reached the part of the podcast where we play a game called Two Truths and a Lie.
Nice.
Yes. So I did ask you in advance because some of this stuff, the idea is for me to try to figure this out, or for us, because I really hope the listeners hang out and try to figure this out as well. So you'll have to tell us 3 things, of which 2 of them are true and 1 is a lie. And then I have to figure that out.
Nice.
So, yes, if you're ready.
I am ready.
Okay,
perfect. So while on Warp Tour, I was actually pulled up on stage to sing San Dimas High School football rules with the Ataris, which was hands down one of the greatest musical moments of my life. Like, it's my favorite Ataris song, first off. And then second off, it was at fucking Warp Tour. Like, you can't ask for a better Warp Tour experience than that. The second one is the trailer hitch broke on our trailer, and actually the tongue fell on my foot, breaking it. So not only did the hitch break, but then my foot broke as well. 3 days after that, we had to showcase for a record label down in New York City. So I didn't have medical insurance, so I couldn't get my broken foot fixed. So all I did was like triple up the socks and take out my shoelace because my foot was so swollen it wouldn't fit in my shoe properly. And I had to like dance around and jump on stage while we were performing to hopefully get signed by a record label, which we did. So maybe the broken foot was good luck. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one was on tour. Our van actually broke down on Long Island, and we had to ride in the back of a U-Haul truck across the GW bridge because they didn't have any other vans that we could rent. And we needed something that was powerful enough that could still tow our trailer behind it. And when you think of a U-Haul truck, you can really only fit like 3 people up front. So we had the 5 guys in the band, plus our tour manager, plus our merch guy, plus 3 of our girlfriends were with us. My wife was with us as well. So to go across the bridge, we all had to sit in the back of a U-Haul truck that had no light. So yeah, it was a good experience.
Damn it. And I say, damn it, because the way that you just shared all that is like, fuck, any of them could be true.
See, and here's the thing. So my wife will be the first person to say that I have a master's degree in bullshit. And I make it a point, and this is no joke, I make it a point to try to see what I can spin that my wife will believe.
Oh, wow.
And like, even my son has caught on that I'll tell him something and he'll look at me and go, Dad, pinky promise? And he'll hold up his pinky because he knows it's the only way to get me to fold and tell him like, nah, I was just kidding, dude. Like we were watching Muppet Babies this morning, and I told him that we had him audition for Muppet Babies when he was a kid, and that we failed the audition because he told that Rolf asked him, what shape is my face? And you said it's the shape of a butt. And they said that we couldn't have you on the show because that's not appropriate for the Muppets. And he goes, I didn't do that. I go, well, no, dude. Well, you wouldn't remember. You were only like 3. And he goes, pinky promise, Dad. And like, you just tell he was like, wait, did I really miss out on being on Muppet Babies? So it's little things like that, like just trying to see what I can put over on people. So good luck for which one is the lie.
Shit. So I want to say the U-Haul is a lie.
The U-Haul is the truth. That is true. My wife claims that she still has anxiety from hanging out in the back of a dimly lit U-Haul van because the light only goes on when you stop. When you drive, the light that's in the back turns off. So we literally had to use like cell phones for flashlights. And then after we got over the GW, we actually sandwiched my wife and Tim's wife up front with our bass player. And the rest of us were playing a game where we would stand while the U-Haul was driving, and the last person to fall over would quote unquote win. Yeah. It's so illegal and so terrible and we were stuck on the bridge for like an hour and a half to 2 hours that finally when we got over the bridge, they opened up the lift gate in the back and just steam came out from all the body heat back there. Like, yeah, it was nuts, but we got to continue the tour. So it was nice.
Yes, that was a plus.
So I'll give you one more guess between either the trailer hitch or the Ataris. Which one do you think was a lie?
Oh gosh. The Atari Warped Tour?
Yes, that is a dream of mine, but it did not actually happen. I would have loved to have done that. We've played with Chris, the singer for the Ataris. He did an acoustic set in Syracuse that we also got to play with him. And then we randomly were on a show with them in Pennsylvania. But the last time that Honor Right was on Warped Tour, the Ataris were on the tour as well. And I made a point to watch them every single day. And in my mind's eye, I kept imagining myself being able to go up on stage and perform with them. But alas, it did not happen. But the trailer hitch one, that absolutely was true. And I had a broken foot while we auditioned for a record label. And then after the show, I had to stand outside talking to the owner of the record label, trying not to like weep in pain because my foot hurt so bad.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So good times, but good. You got on the second go. That's not bad.
Yeah. I was actually thinking, okay, so what was his voice tone changed that would have made to help me out as far as which one was a lie? You were really excited about the Warped Tour. And I'm going, that's probably because he wishes it happened. So that's how
and you got it.
I did. Yeah. But the one about the U-Haul, I was like, nah, I mean, the luck.
And it's funny too, because I'd asked my wife, I was like, hey, I got to do 2 truths and a lie. I go, what's a good tour story? And she goes, the U-Haul. Like, it just looks at me like the fucking U-Haul. I was like, ooh, good call, V.
Yeah, nice. Well, that's good. See, we learned something new. Figure out a little bit of a tale there for next time.
Right, there you go.
So thank you for playing with me. I appreciate that.
Of course. Thanks for letting me play.
Okay. So before we go, can you tell us what we're currently working on or what's coming up next that you can share?
Yeah. So I've got a couple books in the pipeline. Bad Habits, which is the first book of a series called Wages of Sin. And this is co-written. So this is Only James, who I've done multiple books for her. I did the 4 books that are the Elite Protection Services.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also did an earlier book for her, which is not part of the same series, but it was the first time her and I had worked together. It was a book called Disciplinary Action, which all of those are male romance books. And I do the entire book by myself. So I'll do one chapter will be a point of view of one character, another chapter is a point of view of a different character. And typically it's like age gap romance, which is really, really cool. With the Elite Protection Services, almost all of them involve, because it's basically it's like a bodyguard that falls in love with the person they're protecting. So it's really, really cool. It's like a good dynamic, and it was really fun to try to create all these different voices. But this book, Bad Habits, is actually done, co-written by Nev Wilder. And it was my first time working with her. But what's really cool about this book is one main character is a bounty hunter, and the other one is a black hat hacker. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's very underworld. Like, let's see how this goes. And I loved it. I just recently finished up that book. It'll probably be another month before it comes out, but that's one I would definitely tell people to keep keep on their radar. I also recently did Pretty Boy, which is another KM Newhold book, which I did with the incorrigible Timothy Page. So it's him and I returning to romance one another on yet another book. And then some other fun ones I've got in the pipeline. There's a production studio called Audiobooks that they deal exclusively with LGBTQ plus storylines. And I got to do one which one of the main characters is a serial killer that solves mysteries. And then the other main character is his handler to make sure that he doesn't basically go off the leash. And that was another male romance, which I adore doing that book. I've got a couple books coming out. One is a sports romance, male-female sports romance. I've got, if anybody's a fan of Gossip Girl, I have a 2-book series that's coming out through Dreamscape that it's very entitled individuals in the upper crust of New York City. And then I earlier mentioned that I have a fantasy love story coming out through Blackstone. So that'll be some new ones. With those other books, I can't give you guys the names or who I'm working with, but I will tell you that the fantasy love story and then also the New York upper crust ones, my co-narrator, because I don't know the one for the sports one yet, but my co-narrators on those ones are top level talent. And I'm incredibly honored to be able to perform on the same book with them.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I know sometimes when we ask what's coming down or what's going up, they're like, oh, I can't share. I'm like, but can you tell me something? Tease me, baby. Tease me. Right? Tell me what's coming.
Well, that's what I was like. Can I give the author? Can I give my co-narrator? I was like, you know what? I'll just give you guys the production studio so you can pay attention to what they have coming out and then just look for my name. I do everything underneath my normal name right now. I don't use a pseudonym. So all my books you can find Liam DiCosimo.
Well, that's the other thing too. I do follow and on social media, some of the productions because they do share information or teasers, which is great. Nice. So yeah, I'm all about getting the info. So wherever I can get it.
Heck yeah. No, that's perfect. And I think it's fun because it's kind of the peek behind the curtain, you know?
Yes, exactly. But no, thank you for saying, because I feel sometimes people are like, oh, I only listen or read fantasy, or I only listen to sports. And so at least knowing that you have some of the stuff coming up is helpful, but also it gets us all like excited because we're like, yay.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of a taste for everybody. You can find something you'll like.
Yes. Perfect. Exactly. So we'll keep an eye out, and I'll make sure to tweet and share when all this stuff comes out so people can find it if they are not following you, which they really should. I mean,
right? If they're not, then what are you even on social media for? I am absolutely a dream to follow. I will be the most entertaining person you'll follow on Twitter. I wish that were true, but I'll make that claim and I'll let you guys decide whether or not that's if that was a truth or a lie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, like not all the narrators are on social media. So they have, listeners have to rely on either the author or the production company or, individuals like myself with the podcast or just reviewers to figure out what's coming up next. And sometimes you guys don't share because you can't. So we're like, okay, we'll wait until someone else tells me.
Right. Well, and I would like to say if there are other narrators that are listening right now that would like to jump on the Love Gods at some point, especially people that exist in the romance realm, we would absolutely love to have them on. And even listeners that aren't narrators, if you have a narrator you'd like to hear on the show, send us a recommendation. If you're not comfortable reaching out to them, we'll try to reach out to them, and I will badger them until they finally acquiesce to my request.
Fine, I'll do it. Right.
I love it. That's pretty much the way that's how I got my wife to say yes to marrying me. And having not one, but 2 kids. I mean, you got to browbeat them somewhere.
Yeah. Right. You've got to get them to the point where they're like, okay, whatever, fine.
She says, my wife has said on multiple occasions, whatever will get you to shut up.
Oh, yeah. See, now I'm like, ooh, who would be fun for you guys to talk to? So now I have my list in my head running to send you guys.
Well, I think after the rap battle, I feel like Tim and I have to have Joe Arden on. So that's somebody I'm going to try to. I'm going to try to get on the show because I think that would be a fun one. Aaron Shedlock's another one, which I think he's already committed to coming on. So that's
awesome. No, he's great. I love him, Aaron. I love him, and he's great to talk to too. So
perfect. Yeah. And I've got, like I said, with the books I have coming up on the pipeline, all those co-narrators, you better believe I'm going to be hitting them up going, hey, would you like to jump on the podcast?
Yeah. Well, I again, it's great, but also sometimes I struggle with scheduling because I also feel bad. I'm like, you guys are busy. Do you want to stop what you're doing that gives you the paycheck to come talk to me for a little bit? So at least from my perspective, I always feel like, oh, okay, so yes. And I get all giddy when you guys do. So thank you for that.
No problem. And I think with Tim and I, we have that advantage of if we don't have a guest on, him and I will just answer the questions between the two of us. So, if we have a week that we're like, oh, scheduling just didn't work, we couldn't get somebody on the show, him and I will fuck around for, 30 to 40 minutes and call it a day.
Yeah, see, man, now I might have to get like a field day like you guys have, just when that happens for me. Look, you guys solved the problem for me. See, and now who to do?
You could always get somebody that somebody else that's an avid audiobook listener and just be like, hey, what are you listening to lately?
Yes, exactly. Ooh, good. Yeah, because sometimes it's like,
I was gonna say, and it'll be great because they'll go, I only exclusively listen to Liam DiCosimo books because he is my all-time favorite narrator, and I will go, I love you. You're my favorite too.
All right. So if you're out there and you only listen to Liam, hit me up. I want to talk to you.
Yeah. And hopefully it's somebody other than my mom, because this is starting to get awkward that she's listening to these books. No, I'm kidding. I have literally told her, Mom, don't listen to these books. Please. I told her the murder mystery, the first one I did. And then the sequel to that one, I go, that's it. Those are the only books you can listen to. I told her all green light books for her.
See, sometimes I wonder what would be more awkward, your mom listening to those books or having her friends come to her and say, oh my God.
I heard your son.
Yes.
He's
so
different than I remember. Different than the altar boy we remember from the 90s. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah. It's always fun. I mean, even with my own kid, and he'll bust out with something like, who are you talking to now? I mean, he's like, is it one of your narrator friends, or is it, why are you doing a graphic design with a half naked guy on it? And I'm like, it's called romance. And
can it be both?
Yeah.
And why are you judging?
Yeah, it's like, go away, go listen to some of your music.
Right.
Yes. And then I'll hear, Metallica or Queen, and I'm going, okay, good, I'm raising him right. Good.
Right, there you go.
Those little things.
That's the litmus test for whether or not the child has been properly raised.
Yeah, right. Music choices. Oh, goodness. Well, thank you so much, Liam, for taking the time to hang out with me today. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, no, I had a blast. I look forward to having you on Love Gods and then eventually returning to this show so we can continue this delightful discussion.
Yes, exactly. And maybe I'll have you and Tim too come over. So that'd be fun too.
Oh, we would do it in a heartbeat. You better believe him.
Awesome.
I will absolutely do that.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, see, again, I have to figure that schedules. If you're not following Liam on social media, make sure that you are doing so. When he does finally tweet or say something, you know what he's doing.
Yep.
But you're good at me. You've gotten a lot better, and just you'll figure it out.
Oh, well, it's hard because I have to run the Hilt Radio Twitter,
Yes.
the Love Gods Twitter. I have one that's specifically for my West Ham United stuff, and then I have the other Twitter account that's specifically for the narration stuff. So, and then I also have the West Ham podcast one. So I have like 5 different Twitter accounts. So just sometimes I get caught up doing one and then neglecting the other one. So I'm trying to find time to give them all the love and attention they deserve.
Yeah. So you're not using a special software to do them all from one dashboard?
No. Well, I just use my phone and I just click back and forth from, one account to the other account, depending on what it is that pops into my little brain going, hey, this sounds like something people would want to read. And then I'll type it out and then delete it because I'll go, no, that's stupid. I'll think of something better.
Well, it's okay. Yeah, I'm sorry too. Then I'm like, oh shit, did I do the right account?
Yes.
That's my biggest fear.
That's the other one. Because it'll be great if on the Disney podcast, I'm tweeting about like giant cocks. And I'm like, oh, well, that's wonderful. We just sabotaged that account.
Yeah, new followers, not what you were looking for.
Yeah, right. They're like, They're like, I love WandaVision. And I'm like throbbing meat muscles. And they're like, I don't know about this account.
Is this a new episode that I have yet to see?
Yeah, right. Wow, this took a very dark turn. I wasn't expecting this from Marvel, but I mean, good on them to really push the boundaries of what's acceptable.
Exactly. You never know. Well, if I will provide all these links for these podcasts as well as where you can find Liam in the episodes post at Viviana Enchantress of Books. And so until next time, happy listening.
A heartfelt thank you to all of our Audiobook Lovin Podcast Patreon. Special thanks to Jen Franklin, Brittany Cottingham, Leanne Schwartz, Christy Reitz, Mendy Summer, Jesse Stafford, Chrissy Font, Rhonda Pezzarello, Evelyn Clarisi, Michelle DaCosta, Emily Dye, Michelle Bestard, Farah Blair, Candice Platel, Carol Liebner, Bethany Crane, Teresa Martin, Jennifer Mirabelli, Kaylee Loring, Victoria Butler, Alyssa Prendergast, Rula Hart, and Carrie Wallace. The Audiobook Lovin Podcast has special Patreon access levels. Join today to receive early access to podcast episodes, exclusive content with our guests, and much more. Support the podcast by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/audiobooklovin. We thank you for your support.
Thank you for joining us on the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, hosted by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. For links and more information discussed in today's episode, previous podcasts, or the Audiobook Lovin Series, please visit our website, vivianaenchantressofbooks.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a positive review wherever you listen to our podcast. Until next time, happy listening.